For the first time in probably 1,700 years, Christians around the world will not be permitted to celebrate Easter in public. What is a country founded on religious liberty supposed to do when the government locks the churches? This is Verdict with Ted Cruz. Welcome back to Verdict with Ted Cruz, and happy Easter. I'm Michael Knowles, Senator. Sorry we can't be celebrating today together. We're at a safe social distance. I think I am not exaggerating here when I say this might be the first time since the Diocletian persecution that Christians have not been able to go to their churches on Easter. Is that an exaggeration?
Well, you know, I got to say it is so commonplace to have podcasts talking about the Diocletian persecution. Yes. I mean, it really. I'm worried that we're going to run into the traffic online with that.
That's true. The views spike through the roof, right?
You and I have never seen anything like this in our lifetimes, and it's all of us, we're doing everything from home.
Yeah,
and whether that's church, whether that's work, whether that's time with the family. It has good aspects to it, and it also makes people pretty stir crazy.
This, I think, is the big issue for people. I think for a while, people liked taking a few days off work. Obviously, that got real old real fast when people lost their jobs. I think people actually, for the first few days of this shutdown, were kind of excited. It was something new. It was dangerous. Maybe we were all going to band together. Again, that kind of got real old real fast. The one thing that I think was always a sticking point was the churches, the government closing down the churches. To my mind, that's unprecedented in the United States. Is that what you're hearing and seeing as well? I mean, is that just a different category?
Look, it's a hard challenge because if you have, as we do, a pandemic, a public health outbreak, there is precedent for quarantining laws. There's precedent for preventing large gatherings. You know, I will say it, in this time of crisis, people's real character comes out. Who they are comes out. And I got to say, some of these Democratic politicians are just jackbooted thugs.
Yeah.
I mean, they're authoritarians. They believe in the power of the state. So, Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York. Now, listen, New York has got it worse than anywhere else in the country. It is horrific. The deaths that have happened there, the infections, people are scared. I get all of that. But de Blasio said, listen, if any church or synagogue meets, we're going to come after you and we will permanently shut you down. Now, who the hell are you to permanently shut a church or synagogue down? And I actually understand saying, okay, you can't have a public gathering. What my church is doing, we're meeting virtually.
Yeah.
I think that actually makes good sense. But you see some of these political leaders just eager to strip away liberty, and they seem to have a real animosity to faith.
That's right. If you look at New York, I mean, that's exactly the right example where it's not de Blasio saying, we're going to shut you down for the whole of this pandemic. You are not going to be allowed back into your building, Pastor, until afterward. But that's not where they stopped it. They actually said, we will permanently shut you down. And he actually singled out churches and synagogues. He didn't go after any other faith groups. He just went after churches and synagogues. How convenient, It's not just de Blasio, though. It's going on around the country. And even for the people, I know a lot of conservatives, we want to keep our rights, but we're obviously willing to entertain some quarantines.
In Pennsylvania, they arrested a woman for driving her car.
Oh, my God.
Driving your car, you're not violating social distancing. You're sitting in your own damn car. Like this is not a police state.
Right. Not yet.
And you're seeing, North Carolina, they arrested David Benham. David and Jason Benham, the Benham brothers, are friends of mine. They're great guys. So the North Carolina governor, a Democrat, determined that elective abortions are essential. And so that abortion clinics could gather, they could all get together. And so the Benham brothers went outside and wanted to provide pregnancy counseling, wanted to peacefully tell moms that were coming in, that were considering abortions, there are alternatives. If you want to pursue adoption, here are some of the resources available to you.
Right.
And they sent the police to arrest them. And actually the video, I tweeted out the video. I'd encourage you to watch that video because David he said, look, we're being peaceful. He's very calm. He's not angry. They're not harassing anyone. He said, we're 6 feet away. We're not gathering. We're not violating social distancing. But if the governor is going to say that the abortion is essential, that the doctors and all the staff can gather there, more than 10 people in public, then how can that be essential? But yet the counseling of pregnancy alternatives is not equally essential. And it's interesting. The officers are arresting him, and you can see the officers are reluctant. And David, to his credit, he's praising the officers. He said, "Listen, thank you for your service, particularly now." I mean, he's polite. He's praising them, and it just shows. Look, and I don't want to make this partisan. And if there are Republicans doing it, I will happily call them out too. It just seems to be it's the Democratic governors and the Democratic mayors that in that instance, he's hard pro-abortion and hard anti-pro-life.
Yeah.
And so it's not, if you want to say neither of them are essential, fine. That I actually understand that determination, but you can't pick one side and silence those that would try to give alternatives.
Well, it's so ironic, and it totally gives away the game where they say if you gather together to procure an abortion, that will not endanger life. And let me tell you something. Abortion 100% of the time endangers life. They say, no, that won't endanger life. But if you go and offer some counseling, you also gather together, that will endanger life. It's so backwards. It's such a power grab. Certain states have made exceptions.
In Colorado, they arrested a dad for playing t-ball with his kid.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, that's nutty. I spoke last night to a Nevada state legislator who was complaining the Nevada governor has shut down golf courses. Now I got to say, Michael, it's hard to think of a sport more situated to social distancing. Listen, if you're closer than 6 feet, you ain't doing it right. I'm all for acting sensibly to protect the public safety, but there's some that are just eager to put on that jackboot, and it's scary.
Now, what do you make of these different states? I mean, some states, they've been arresting pastors if they try to hold services. Other states have made an exception for religious services, and it varies state by state. Luckily, we haven't had one national, one-size-fits-all policy for this. I mean, how is that going to play out even after the pandemic's over?
Listen, our law has always respected religious liberty. The First Amendment protects religious liberty. I think we should do everything possible to protect people's right of faith. At the same time, I think the responsible thing to do is to act to protect the community. So my church, Heidi and I are members of First Baptist Church in Houston. It's a big, big church. We've been going to church virtually online. Our pastor made the very sensible decision to say, we're not going to bring people together and have thousands of people in a sanctuary while there's a global pandemic going on. And I will say, as it's Easter, Easter Sunday for as long as I can remember, we would always go to church on Easter Sunday. That's and celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Yeah. But it's worth also remembering, for those of us who are Christians, the church is not a building. The church is not bricks or mortar. So I'm sad not to be there. It's nice to be able to sing and have the music in person. It's nice to be able to worship together. But it actually has been beautiful. So what we do every Sunday morning is we come down to the living room, and we put the live stream of our church up on the TV. Yep. And Heidi and the girls and I, just the four of us in the living room, and we'll watch and participate. And, we have to kind of drag the girls out of bed. And, it's nice. I'll have a cup of coffee. And I'll confess I've done church sometimes in my slippers, which I don't normally do.
Ditto. Same here. I'm ashamed to say, but I did.
But, it's interesting. Number one, I was talking to my pastor earlier this week. He said that the viewership has gone through the roof, that a ton of people are logging on and watching it online who wouldn't necessarily come in person. And it is interesting because we're ending up having much longer conversations with our girls about the sermon, about what's going on. If you're in church, you don't want to talk in church and bother people. If you're in your living room, you can talk to each other and you can say, hey, what do you think about what he just said? And, you can have conversations that flow out of it that are, what the Bible said is the church is the body of believers, is everyone who is a Christian, that we're the church, not the building.
Right.
Right. And so even though Easter Sunday, most of us are not going to be in a physical church, if we are giving thanks for Jesus' resurrection, then we're celebrating Easter, and the church is celebrating. And I hope also, listen, this is a time, I remember back when Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, and it was devastating in Texas. It was the second costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. And it was really amazing to see the churches all throughout Texas, especially on the Gulf Coast, coming out and helping people whose homes had been destroyed, who everything they had was lost. And it was a time when the church was doing what the church should. The church should be helping people in need, people who are scared. People, our church, we've had one member, a woman in her 80s, who died of COVID-19. And the ministry for seniors, it's hard for seniors to be isolated. And this is a time, I hope and I believe the church is doing more to help people who are scared, who are in need. Even if we don't gather in person, it's much more important for the church to reflect the love of Jesus than to stand in one particular building.
Right, and I think there's something else going on here too with regard to the pandemic, which is people always think about Easter, but you forget that you don't get Easter without Good Friday. This is a reminder. This whole season of Lent, which by the way has corresponded exactly with the coronavirus pandemic, Lent begins and you get ashes on your head if you're a Catholic or certain other denominations, and they say, remember man, you are dust, to dust you shall return. And it's very easy in modern life to forget that someday, eventually, we're all going to die. We might not die from the coronavirus, let's hope, but we will die eventually. And that reminder that, I think it was Dr. Johnson said, hanging concentrates the mind. When you look death straight in the face, it focuses you on the bigger questions. In a way, locking down the churches might have a pretty positive effect on religion in the country.
It also brings families together, whether you like it or not. Look, Caroline said, I can't stand it. I've been in this house for a month. And and she's 11. And I'm like, sweetheart, I know we all have. Yeah. We're like ready to jump out the windows. But there have also been, every day, Heidi and I, we've had lunch with the girls. We've had dinner with the girls. That's never happened in the whole time we've been a family. We've never had... And I'll tell you one thing we've started doing a couple of things. One, we go for walks every evening. Yeah. Sometimes family walks. We walk the dog. Sometimes it's just Heidi and me. But like the whole neighborhood is out walking, and it's like Central Houston now. We're 6 feet apart. We stay at a distance, but it's like Central Houston became Mayberry. I mean, it's an amazing thing. But something else we've started doing that I wanted to do for a long time is every night we're reading from the Bible. And listen, I've wanted to do that regularly, and we've done it sometimes. We've done it sporadically, but not with real discipline. And part of it is, being in the Senate, typically I get up Monday mornings, I fly to D.C., and I'm gone for 4 days. I come back Thursday night. It's hard as a dad, if you're in town 2-3 days a week, it's hard to sort of have a family discipline of after dinner, we sit down and read the Bible. Yeah. And I've been like guilty in thinking about it. We need to do more of it. And so with all this time at home, Heidi and I decided, all right, we're going to do this. And our girls didn't like it. I mean, it was a big battle. It was not, this was not mild or easy. And so we started with just Matthew chapter 1 and reading 3 chapters a night. I think the first night it took us, hour and a half to get through 3 chapters. The girls were acting up. It was a bit of a mess. But it's interesting, we've gotten through, I think we're at like Matthew chapter 24. So we haven't been doing it that long, but it's been each night. And it has been really, and what's interesting is it just so happens we're right now moving into Good Friday and Easter. Like just the timing worked out. We didn't sit down and plan it like this. Huh. But last Sunday was Palm Sunday, and we were reading in Matthew where it talks about Palm Sunday and Jesus riding into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. And by the way, my pastor said something very interesting that I didn't know. I don't know if you knew. Did you know that Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Easter, was the day traditionally in Judaism when they selected the lamb to be sacrificed?
I did not know that.
I had never heard that. Our pastor said that this last Sunday, and I thought that was fascinating because a lot of what we've been talking about with the girls was the parallel with Passover and the entire story of Passover, which we kind of take digressions as we're reading the Bible to say, okay, the people of Israel were in captivity in Egypt and the 10 plagues. And so Catherine sang a song on the 10 plagues like that struck Egypt. But we were talking about, that for the angel of death to pass over your home, that you had to put the lamb's blood on the side of the door on the top. And that is what Easter is all about, is that Jesus was the lamb sacrificed for us. And the Passover lamb, Jesus was that same sacrifice. And that story, having the opportunity to talk about it at this time where Easter's at home,
right?
It has made it, I think, in many ways more meaningful than being in a big service with a bunch of other people.
Of course. This is something that my wife and I have been doing too in our little one-bedroom apartment. I think probably my greatest risk of death right now is not any pandemic. It's going to be murder when my wife finally snaps. But if that doesn't happen, in the meantime, what we've been doing, especially because we're Catholic, so we have certain icons and religious images around. And when we go to church, now the church is at the kitchen table, and we live stream it in from our priest who's down in Southern California, and it's just him on a live stream. And it really focuses you on these images. So then it's just my wife and I sitting in kitchen chairs. There's no smells and bells. There's no beautiful music going on. It's really just us contemplating some of these images, listening to these words, listening to these prayers. And, it does remind you when Jesus says, when you pray, go into your innermost closet, do it in solitude and really make it about that connection to God. And it just gives you another sense when you go and pray the rosary at night and it's just the two of you and everybody's quiet, no one's outside. In a way, it really amplifies your prayer and your spiritual connection to God, even when you can't go into your own church.
Well, and I'll say this also cuts across faith. So some good friends of ours who are neighbors who are Jewish, and they celebrated this week their Passover Seder, which ordinarily they would do with the whole extended family. And they were telling me, okay, so we're just doing it with, mom and dad, and they have a daughter who's really close friends with Caroline, and they have a son who's a little bit younger. And they said what they're doing is just they're FaceTiming on, I think, iPads with their extended family. So with parents and sisters, they're not, most of us are not seeing our parents. My dad's 81, my mom's 85. I haven't seen either one of them in over a month because I'm not going to jeopardize their health. But it is interesting, even a Passover Seder, I've been to a lot of Seders and they're wonderful and fun, but you think of them as, big groups of multi-generational extended family. And with technology, you can even do that if it's just a few of you and you're trying to socially distance. You can still have a wonderful faith and family experience together. And I suspect we'll look back at these. It wouldn't surprise me if when our girls are grown, they look back to this time of spending day after day and week after week together as a family as some of their favorite time ever. Now, they wouldn't admit that now.
Right. Who would?
But it is, Caroline is in our front yard right now building a little bit of a tree house in a tree and, coming and pulling me out of, I'm on conference calls with work and doing I'm in the middle of what basically a teletour across Texas, like talking with all different communities. But like Caroline comes yesterday and says, Dad, we need your help to cut the lumber. I'm not very handy, but thankfully I have told her, okay, no power tools. As an 11-year-old, I don't want severed digits, so I got the jigsaw and managed to cut the board without, in fact, severing any of my digits. So that was good.
That's
but
a positive.
it's kind of right in the middle of the day. It's like come to the garage and let's cut lumber to build the treehouse.
There's something really nice about that. And I've noticed the same thing as you mentioned with your friends in the Passover Seder. People, family members, old friends that I have not called in a long time. Now we're just doing calls because that's what people are doing. I mean, it's and speaking of connecting with people virtually, I know we've only got a few minutes left, but I do want to get to some of the mailbag because we've got some very important questions here. Probably this is the most important one that I've read in weeks, Senator. This is from Amber. Does Ted think Joe Exotic should be pardoned? I'm serious. I want his opinion. Michael can answer too. Senator, what's your answer?
Well, I will say I cracked up laughing that this week at the White House press conference they asked if Joe Exotic should be pardoned, and President Trump, I'm not sure he knew what was going on, but said, yeah, we'll have to look at that, and then that was pretty darn funny. You know, I've got a pet theory.
Yeah.
That the prospect of Joe Exotic being pardoned is why Obama delayed endorsing Joe Biden. Because, you know, look, apparently Joe Exotic ran for president in 2016 against me. I didn't know it at the time, against Trump. So who knows? Maybe Joe Exotic's on the ballot in 2020 and Obama's holding the endorsement back, waiting for the Tiger King endorsement.
This is the most brilliant political insight I have seen in so long. I don't know my feelings on Joe Exotic getting a pardon other than I endorse Barack Obama endorsing Joe Exotic. So I guess that means we got to spring him from the slammer. A very good point, Senator. Next question from Peter. Is there any evidence that China purposely delayed and lied in their report in order to tank the world economy, considering that theirs was already in shambles?
So that's an interesting question. There is absolutely evidence that China purposely delayed and that they covered up, that when the Wuhan outbreak was ongoing, that they hid evidence of it, that they punished the scientists who were trying to blow the whistle, including the doctor who courageously did it anyway and has since died of COVID-19. You know, I'm not aware of any evidence that they did it with the intent of tanking the global economy. Yeah. I think that's probably a stretch. Although when it comes to ascribing malign intentions to the Chinese communists, you almost can't stretch too much.
There's no limit.
But, you know, I had an old boss who was a federal judge who used to say, never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence. And listen, I think the Chinese covered it up because they were embarrassed, because they didn't want people to know. I think there's a very real possibility that this outbreak occurred from some sort of accidental transmission. There were two facilities within miles of the Wuhan wet market where we think this started that were studying coronaviruses in bats. Yeah. And I haven't seen any evidence that this was, look, there's some internet theories that this was manufactured and is like bioterrorism. Look, I'm skeptical that the Chinese government would release a virus on their own people. We've seen tyrannical governments torture and murder their people, but doing it deliberately, I've seen no evidence of that. What strikes me as entirely plausible is that it was a screw up from one of the labs that may have been studying this virus. As I said, we know they were studying coronaviruses from bats. And then the whole cover up was to hide their embarrassment, to hide their, and the reason that matters is if they hadn't covered it up, we could have gone in, we could have contained this outbreak maybe, and found the people who were infected and isolated them and done the contact tracing and potentially stopped this outbreak from becoming an epidemic and then a pandemic. That if you stop it at the origin, it is entirely possible that the deaths worldwide and the trillions of dollars of economic destruction could have been covered up if the Chinese it could have been stopped if the Chinese hadn't engaged in this cover-up.
All right, final question. This is maybe the most important one of all. What are you eating on Easter, and who is doing the cooking?
You know, it's funny. I don't know. So yesterday, Heidi and I were taking our walk, and Heidi's like, all right, what do we want to do for Easter? And I'm like, well, what do you mean, what do you want to do for Easter? And she's like, well, no, we need to, do something for Easter. I'm like, did your family do, big Easter things? And I got to admit, my family, we'd go to church. Yeah. And then we just come home and hang out as a family. It was a Sunday. I mean, we didn't, it wasn't a...
Put on the suit and tie and formal.
It was, I mean, it was not, and we had this big discussion because Heidi kept asking me, well, no, what do we want to do? And I'm like, well, what do you mean do? Like, same thing we do? And she's like, all right, how about an Easter egg hunt? I'm like, okay, if we've done those for our girls, and I think Catherine, who's 9, she's more into it than Caroline, is probably a little too cool for an Easter egg hunt. But I'm like, sure, if you want to get some plastic eggs and put candy or money in them and put them in the backyard, we can do that. But so I don't know what we're going to eat. That's the short answer. We'll probably, Heidi and I are terrible cooks.
Yeah.
Although Caroline has begun cooking at home, so we haven't figured it out. Is the short answer. I think we'll do a nicer meal than just cold pizza.
Right.
But I don't know what it'll be, and maybe we'll order out. It's literally, Heidi is pressing me saying we need to have a big sort of Easter meal. You know, most Easters I would have done, like gone to church and then like gone and taken my mom out to dinner or something and done like a brunch at a restaurant. So we're obviously not going to do that.
Right,
so
that's out. You could always have the mimosas, but you got to do it at home. You know, it's funny because I think what most people are going to do is more like what you did growing up, which is it'll be the first Easter in the pajamas. And frankly, that doesn't sound so bad. Nice time to spend with family. Obviously, Senator, happy Easter to you and happy Easter to everybody else who is listening. I'm Michael Knowles. This is Verdict with Ted Cruz.